It's talked about in the boardrooms of the most successful companies, how bottom line business results are linked to employee engagement driven by inspiring leadership. So let's talk leadership. I'm Bill Hogg, and in this series I talk in depth with senior leaders about high-performing leadership competencies and the tools and techniques they are using to drive business growth in today's economy. With me today is Dr. Dave Williams, President and Chief Executive Officer of Southlake Regional Health Center. But before we begin our discussion, let's get an overview of the company. You might think Southlake Regional Health Center is a brand new hospital, but the truth is that Southlake has been proudly serving the community for more than 85 years. In recent years, Southlake has undergone a stunning transformation from a local community hospital to a foremost regional healthcare center. The state-of-the-art buildings house leading-edge technology and facilities, comparable to and in some cases exceeding what is offered elsewhere in the province of Ontario. It takes a team of more than 2,800 employees, 500 physicians, and 800 volunteers to deliver services in areas that include a world-class cancer center, a world-class cardiac center, nationally renowned for arthritis care, child and adolescent eating disorders, and shoulder surgery. One of only a few hospitals in Canada offer minimally invasive thoracic surgery, fully digital diagnostic imaging facilities including CT, MRI, mammography, and ultrasound, and a level 2 pediatric and prenatal care center. The new Eye Institute with a capacity to perform between 7,000 and 9,000 surgical cases per year. Their vision is to provide shockingly excellent service, and you can find out more about Southlake online. Dr. Dave Williams defines the term overqualified. In 2011, when Dr. Williams joined Southlake as president and CEO, he had previously held senior positions at St. Joseph's Healthcare in Hamilton and Sunnybrook Health Science Center in Toronto, as well as assistant professor of surgery at University of Toronto. And if that's not enough, Dr. Williams has been to space twice as a mission specialist aboard Space Shuttle Columbia in 1998 and again in 2007 on Space Shuttle Endeavour, where he walked in space 3 times and set a Canadian record, spending 17 hours and 47 minutes outside. During this time, he also became the first non-American to hold a senior management position within NASA. Still not content, Dr. Williams became the first Canadian to live and work in space and the ocean when in 2001 he spent 7 days in the world's only underwater research laboratory, Aquarius. Dave, welcome to Let's Talk Leadership. Wow. I mean, I got to tell you, when I started to read the background, I was absolutely blown away. So for someone like yourself, it's a pleasure to have you here to talk about what's involved in leadership. And the reality is to have done all of those things, you must have worked with an enormous amount of different teams all over the world and have some interesting insights. So when you think about leadership, what are some of the key competencies that immediately come to mind?
For me, leadership is a journey, you know, and it's not something that you can read a couple of books on or take a couple of courses. It truly is a lifetime journey that one begins to expand the repertoire of leadership skills that you have based on the experiences that you've had throughout your career. So as you pointed out, my career has been very diverse. I've been very, very lucky in learning about clinical leadership in hospitals, but also learning about leadership in extreme environments as we explore space and go underwater, and the principles that we can take from NASA and the space program of leadership, peak team performance, and bring back to healthcare. I think it's really exciting looking at that opportunity.
So when you think of some of the great leadership competencies, and obviously you've had the opportunity to work with some great leaders, tell me some of the specific competencies that have sort of stuck out in your mind as things that you've sort of looked at as a young person growing and saying, those are things that I'd like to emulate.
You know, I think one of the key elements is engaging frontline team members. Whether you're working in a team of 7 people or whether you're working in a team of 7,000 people, it's being accessible, engaging in those frontline team members, listening to them, understanding the challenges they face, being able to respond. In the space program, there are many leadership moments that exemplify that. One of the most famous that we've all seen in the movie of Apollo 13 is failure is not an option. Gene Kranz looked out at the team in mission control after the Apollo 13 spacecraft exploded halfway to the moon, said to the team, failure is not an option, bring the crew back, do what you've got to do, find me a solution, empowering the team members to come up with that solution.
And I think that's something that, you know, when you put yourself into a high-pressure environment, that type of thing comes to the forefront. But I'm not sure why it is so easily put aside in our day-to-day environment, the concept of failure not being an option. And And I guess the reality is that all too many times leaders don't look at the folks within their team and really expect them to deliver that high-performing event, scenario. How do you bring that to a day-to-day environment where there isn't that high pressure? It's easy to say, oh, well, I mean, when you're in that kind of environment, we've got to make sure we don't fail. But, when it's just a day-to-day thing and, the next day things will carry on again. How do you bring that?
I think depending upon the organization, that can be a challenge. But healthcare, to me, is a very complex environment. There's risks associated with it. I would like to think, and I'm sure all our patients would like to think, that healthcare by nature is high reliability. In space, we refer to this as a zero-fault tolerant environment, and yet we're all human. We all make mistakes. So how do you reconcile that? And I think that's what's exciting about the space program. While we aspire to have situations where we succeed despite impossible odds, we do fail, and it's learning how to fail, learning how to build redundancies or backups into the system to prevent catastrophic consequence of failure. And I think that's what's really exciting, is bringing those lessons into the healthcare arena, where many of those lessons are quite foreign to healthcare.
Mm-hmm. So how do you get the folks involved? I mean, you've got an environment where you have a large team at Southlake today. How do you make sure you're getting the best out of the people on that team?
Yeah, I think the key element in that is making sure you're communicating with the team, that you're visible to the organization, particularly in large organizations. We have over 4,000 team members at Southlake. It's hard for me to maintain high levels of visibility, and yet I try and get out of the office, go over to the hospital in a wide range of times, sometimes in the morning, sometimes in the afternoon. We've actually been out there in evening shifts as well, just to be able to interact with frontline team members and ask, what can we do to help them in their ability to deliver state-of-the-art, high-quality patient care?
Well, I smile when you say, you get across, I assume it's across the road.
Yes.
So, there's too many organizations out there that say we have an open door policy, and then they're puzzled because no one seems to come through the open door.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is, an open door policy shouldn't mean you can come in to see me as a senior leader. The open door policy should mean I'm a leader and I'm walking out that door to meet and greet with the folks in the organization. Tell me how you actually, when the CEO walks onto the floor, that's a pretty imposing and can be somewhat nerve-wracking event. How do you really start to get in touch with people and create a dialogue that's real and genuine, where you break down that boundary of the role and relationship?
I think the most important element there is asking questions, soliciting people's opinions, asking for feedback, as opposed to going in and directing and talking all the time, being in the listening mode. And sometimes for leaders that can be the hardest thing, is sitting back and actually listening to the team instead of going in with immediate solutions. Or when the team begins to talk, you listen a couple minutes and then cut them off right away and start directing a solution. But I think for us, it's really a great opportunity. We go out in our weekly safety and quality rounds. We have choreographed questions that we ask all the team members, and we sit back and listen and continually ask them on how we can help them to improve the quality of patient care.
Well, and I think that's one of the critical issues is, from a leadership perspective, a competency that I would look for is that ability to really listen with an open mind, as opposed to, you, as you say, I've heard you say a couple of things, now I know where we're going, let me drive the boat again. Mm-hmm. So, how do you ensure that people on your team bring that same sort of attitude towards listening? Is there any ways in which you sort of, challenge your team to do that?
So I think there's many different ways you can do it. Fundamentally at Southlake, we start with our culture. And we define the organizational culture as the way in which we do business at Southlake, the way in which we commit to delivering high-quality, safe medical care. And then we talk about our values and how our values align to our culture. And our values are really quite edgy. Needless to say, our first value is we put patients first. Well, that's pretty standard for healthcare institutions. The next one is we give a damn. We actually care. And we're courageous enough to actually say in public, we give a damn. And that we honor our commitments, our relentless commitment to putting patients first. And then we're also there to push the envelope, thinking about innovative ways of doing things. So we articulate this, we talk about it, we talk about leadership. And we actually define leadership for folks. And I love going in, talking to senior leaders and just ask, what's your definition of leadership? And there's a pause. Well, it's all about vision. It says, our definition is very simple. It is a definition. It's the ability to influence others.
Yeah.
And we focus on that because there's downward leadership, but there's upward influence in organizations, which we call followership. So basically what we're doing is trying to create an environment of high levels of engagement of team members in influencing the organization, everyone in the organization, to do what's best for patients.
Well, and I think that comes back to your values, and I wanted to just sort of circle back on that a little bit, because one of the things I loved about the values when I read them is, and you sort of spoke to them very briefly, but you didn't give the full richness of how you define those values, which are available on your website. And historically, I find that organizations will, some of them literally have a word, integrity or, curiosity or innovation, and that's their value. But what you've done is two things, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about, the experience of how they were created. But the two things is you've put the values in the language of the brand. We give a damn. And then you've got a lot of information below it to really express what that means. So how did you go through the process of identifying what those values were, and then once you've gotten them, about putting them in language that people really understood, because I think that's an important part of communication. Yeah.
Fundamentally, the process is one of engagement, and engaging all the team members through employee surveys, team member surveys, to find out where their passions lie and which are the core values of the institution itself. Right now we're in the process of renewing our strategic plan for the next 5 years, and interestingly, the core values that we just mentioned have been refreshed. Everybody loves them. They're part of our culture. They're almost imprinted or hardwired in our organization. And our vision, the shockingly excellent service, we tweaked that a little bit. Now we're committed to delivering shockingly excellent, innovative care. Just a subtle change from service. Yeah. But the shocking excellence is part of our culture at Southlake. It's the way in which we do things. We're not happy if you're just marginally satisfied. Yeah. If you rate us as excellent, it's okay. We want you to be shocked with the excellence that you find in our organization. A model very similar to Nordstrom's and other many private sector organizations.
Well, and the truth of the matter is that, more and more organizations, public sector as well, are looking to the private sector and some of the leaders in a customer service basis to really define how they provide their products or services. So it's interesting that you mentioned Nordstrom's, because the government of Ontario, through Service Ontario, has also really tried to make a focus around the customer. Now, you and I, in our pre-conversation, we had a very interesting discussion about customer focused versus patient focused versus employee focused, and so let's sort of chat about that a little bit. I know that an organization like Nordstrom's might say, we're a customer-focused organization, but of course you have chosen not to. So a little bit of history on why you've chosen not to and how you've actually taken that thinking and made it applicable.
Yeah, so right now in the strategic plan, we're looking at the focus of the organization. We're committed to putting patients first. So our customer, our patient, is number one in our organization. Now the question is, how do we measure our outcomes relative to putting patients first? How do we define that? So we're engaged in a journey to take evidence-based medicine, the scientific principles underlying medicine, into a new arena. And we've defined this as quality-based medical care. So quality-based medicine basically asks, how do we deliver the scientific protocols that we find are appropriate for each patient? How do we deliver on that clinical evidence that's out there? And that's all into the business arena and looking at customer service, looking at outcomes that are expected from patients and their families, integrating that outcome with the outcome that's desired from the clinical team, talking about this and defining what success might look like, and then not only just delivering on that successful outcome, but shocking everyone with the excellence with which they achieve the outcome.
Well, what I like is, and this is kind of interesting, I know a lot of clients and customers, businesses struggle with, talking about something like customer service, because I think we agree that in order for us to provide an excellent patient experience or visitor or customer experience, you really have to start internally. If you don't get it right inside, and so the fact that you've really focused it around the outcomes allows everybody to understand that, I may not directly, interact with somebody that's a patient, but I am interacting with people within my own organization. And after the break, I'd like to talk a little bit more about that.
Okay.